Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us on Head Inside Mental Health, featuring conversations about mental health and substance use treatment with experts from across the country, sharing their thoughts and insights on the world of behavioral healthcare. Broadcasting on WPVM 1037, the voice of Asheville, independent commercial free radio. I'm Todd Weatherly, your host, therapeutic consultant, behavioral health expert, my distinguished guest and friend and co-conspirator in the endeavor to make the world a better place. Dr. Kristen Zaleski joins me on the show today. Zaleski, excuse me, I'm sorry. Dr. Zaleski is the Chief Clinical Officer for the Mental Health Collective, a residential treatment program in Southern California, providing attachment-focused, evidence-based treatment for adults living with mental illness and trauma disorders, as well as the Chief Clinical Officer and co-founder of the Neurodivergent Collective, providing evidence-based therapeutic care to diagnose, support, and assist neurodivergent adults. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit too. A psychotherapist and researcher by trade, Dr. Zaleski is a recognized expert on sexual violence in American society. Her current research focuses on technology-facilitated sexual violence, with a particular emphasis on AI-generated non-consensual pornography. That's interesting stuff. What a world we live in. She is the author of Understanding and Treating Military Sexual Trauma, now in its second edition, the first social work text dedicated to the subject. Her second book, Women's Journey to Empowerment in the 21st Century, published by Oxford University Press in 2019, examines global human rights abuses through a transnational feminist lens. Her peer-reviewed research explores sexual violence, treatment frameworks, and qualitative analysis of unique trauma experiences, including child marriage and online sexual violence. An active figure in the Los Angeles clinical community as a consultant and trainer, she's nationally recognized for her contributions to military and online sexual violence research. She serves as the chair of the Military Sexual Violence Division at the Center for Law and Military Policy, is an active board member of the Meta's Global Safety Data Interest Group on Online Sexual Violence, and sits on the advisory board of ASHIO, a global advocacy organization combating female genital mutilation and cutting. Additionally, she is the founding director of Forensic Mental Health and the USC Keck Human Rights Clinic, where she conducts psychological evaluations for asylum seekers who've experienced human rights abuses. Dr. Z, welcome.
Wow, you did the whole thing. That's a mouthful. Thanks for the warm introduction.
No. Well, I mean, I know that you're like this cool lady who's fun at parties.
Or the boring one at parties.
I like nerds unite, and we just find ourselves kind of like over in a circle somewhere talking about whatever interests us the most. But you know, I we have got there's so much to unpack, and not only what you research and what your specialty is in, but also the work you do with Mental Health Collective, a program we collaborate with on a regular basis. You and I have worked together, which I completely enjoy. I I don't think I actually know what is AI porn? What is the what like tell me what that is first of all. I have no clue, and I'm grateful not to have a clue, but you're going to give it to me.
Yeah, so to introduce that, I need to introduce sort of the bigger picture, which is non-consensual intimate images, NCII. Another term in the literature is technology facilitated sexual violence. So, it's a play on what maybe you and I knew in our high school days of a Polaroid picture that got passed around of, some naked imagery, uh, non-consensually, right? Or those released videos of Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee, for example, right? These were all non-consensual examples of sexual and intimate imagery. But with technology, it rapid fires across the world, right?
Well,
So
I've got kids in high school, so there have been a few expulsions as a
that's
result
right.
of somebody sharing something that was inappropriate to share, was not, and not only was it inappropriate, but it was also shared without the person's consent.
That's right. So with high school, middle school, and high school kids, that's where a lot of the advocacy focus is right now on this topic generally, because part of exploring your sexuality, as the Polaroid picture example exemplifies, is, some kids choose to share a sexy photo with someone they're dating, to sort of tiptoe into, how to negotiate sexual boundaries. And when that gets taken advantage of, we then consider that child pornography. And schools are taken by surprise when they get this report that this is happening, because it's a whole new universe
Right.
of, how do we stop this? Do we go into every student's phone and tell them to erase this text message? Is it in a group chat? It's a terrible epidemic, and parents and law enforcement are having to play catch up really quickly to get on top of this.
Well, I
And
guess it gets complicated because that's technically child porn, right?
yep,
Some two 16-year-olds are doing whatever they
yep,
do. They take a picture of either themselves or one another, and then now that's an image that's recorded. That's technically child porn if it's nudity.
yep,
And then they share it, so now they're sharing child porn. Those are pretty serious offenses that are hard to get out from underneath if
absolutely.
you get
Yeah.
them as an adult. I wow, that opens up a whole world of like legal problems and management and like discipline problems and everything else for schools. Like, so what are we doing about it? Like, what's the way forward?
Well, the laws are trying to get a hold of it. And, I'm not an expert on sort of all 50 states' laws, but I can tell you that it's hard in most states to convict somebody who is purposefully um, distributing and creating, this type of abuse. If the person, let's say, a partner took the intimate image, by some state laws, they own that image and they can share it with whoever they want, including the internet, right? So there's ownership pieces to this. And then we have had, as advocates, I think we're doing a better job in 2025, but in 2017, it was a brand new topic, and people weren't understanding how victims of this crime could be traumatized without ever being touched. People who have had this happen to them are absolutely showing symptoms that you would expect a sexual assault, face-to-face sexual assault victim to show. And it took a lot of convincing, and it still does, in some cases, for people to understand how having a naked image of yourself, in your whole high school
Yeah.
would negatively impact you and give you stress related, trauma related symptoms. So, there's different sort of dives here, and different police departments. I live in Los Angeles. I still will make a report with a client, and I'll come across a responding officer who has never taken this case and doesn't know the law and doesn't understand how to do it. And that's in a pretty big city where, this happens pretty frequently. I can't
Which means
imagine,
it
a
sits
small
and doesn't do
town. Yeah,
anything, right? Is that like it's like the rape kit cases, they just hundreds of them that
exactly.
just sat there and that never anything was done.
Yeah. And it's rape kit is a good example, right? And for the listeners who don't know what a rape kit is, when someone's sexually assaulted, there's sort of a standard of care that you can go into a hospital, and every hospital across the nation does certain things, prophylactic medication to prevent pregnancy or sexually transmitted diseases, DNA collection through the use of swabs, and, things like that, medical care generally for any injuries. We are developing a rape kit for technology facilitated sexual violence as well. Those do exist, but a lot of law enforcement agencies don't know about them. So it has to be an advocate that usually tells the victim, hey, you can do steps, ABC, to help sort of create evidence and maintain it. But it's hard.
Well, I imagine it's not just hard to kind of like navigate the law. It's also, I bet it's hard, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it's probably hard for law enforcement officers to wrap their head around it.
Yeah. That's right. Because it's, the issue is consent always when we're talking about sexual violence. And so, in most of these cases, a consensual image was created, right? But the non-consensual part is the wide distribution to the high school group text or Pornhub, so that becomes the non-consensual piece, and officers have a hard time understanding that. Also, when you get to the internet, we're no longer talking about local police departments. We're talking about the FBI,
Right.
and that system's pretty overwhelmed and overloaded. So unless it's a pretty popular case, not much is going to really happen. So again, getting better. And if you watch policy discussions, Melania Trump in February, I believe, came out against revenge porn, which is what this is called, and AI generated images, and is asking our national leaders to create laws to protect victims from this crime. So
Well,
I'm
victims
hoping
are
that her
DEI, so we got to get rid of victims now too, isn't that right?
So AI is an interesting discussion. So artificial intelligence can create images of kids, engaging in sexual acts. The question is that harmful? The answer from advocates is if you have somebody who is searching for and creating and distributing sexual images of children, that is harmful as a whole to children. Oftentimes, AI generated pornography of children is based on some real photos. So the faces might actually be a child that exists in the world. And then all of a sudden they're engaging in this, disgusting
Right.
act. So states like the state I'm in California, it's sort of a gray area. We have to report the consumption of child pornography. The question is, do we have to report the consumption of AI generated child pornography? As the state law exists in California right now, we have to report it if someone's creating it and distributing, disseminating it. But the consumption of it so far does not appear to be in the law. But it's complicated. And so all of us get stuck when we meet a person, usually a man, who is consuming AI generated child pornography, and how we begin to help them, and when we have to do that mandatory report as clinicians. Adult AI generated porn usually is done with a sextortion or revenge porn angle. It's rare that it's a random generated image. For the most part, it's usually partners or predators, like
They're taking
celebrities.
someone, crafting an image, putting it on.
Exactly. Like they'll
Right.
take, a female celebrity's face, put it on a pornographic movie, and then it looks like someone we know and see in the movies is having actual sex, right? And that's obviously harmful to the person whose image it is. And in the cases that I can tell you with clients that I've worked with, I always talk about a school teacher that I worked with where she lost her job. It was a small town. She was a well-known school teacher. Her ex-boyfriend put her image on these pornographic videos, but because the town isn't educated on AI-generated porn, they assumed she had created a pornographic movie. And so she immediately got reported because she works with kids. She lost her job. She had to leave her hometown. Her whole life was destroyed because of this revenge porn AI generated video.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's wrong with people? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's an interesting piece in the literature so far too, in sexual violence in the military, we see men and women equally being victims, right? If you look at the statistics, it's a bit misleading because women have higher statistics of being sexually assaulted in the military than men. And that just has to do with the number of the
Men to
N
women
variable,
ratio,
right?
right?
But if you
Yeah.
look at like the raw numbers, there's equal there. With children who are sexually assaulted, with women, or girls, it's 1 in 4. With males, it's 1 in 8. So still pretty comparable. But when we're looking at technology and sexual violence, we're looking at 9 out of 10 cases, women are the victims. And I find that very fascinating that it is, if we talk about gender-based violence, technology and sexual violence are very much gender-based at women specifically.
What fascinates you about that? What is that? What
That, I
turns
mean,
the
this might
cogs?
sound silly, but in 2 decades of doing sexual assault research, I've always been dispelling the stereotypes that it's just women. I've been trying to show that this is an epidemic that is non-discriminatory of gender. And in this case, it's not that way. It is absolutely a form of gender-based violence. So I guess my 20 years of trying to dispel that myth, I can't right now. And it feels harmful and hurtful, right? It's like this is I mean, all forms of rape, of course, are violent and personal, but you know, this is so premeditated, right? To create a video, to harness an image, there's so much emotion, hurt, length of time, to do these things and to distribute this material. And a lot of the survivors I work with, they will work with like internet companies like Reddit or Pornhub and try to get the images down. And the perpetrators are watching and they'll repost it. So it's
Yeah.
not just this single incident trauma, it is ongoing. And as a treating therapist, I'm really stuck because, with sexual assault, there's a start and end point, right? Domestic violence, it's a bit longer. They might be in that relationship for years, but usually by the time they get to me, there's been an end point. With technology and sexual violence, there's rarely an end point. I am now working with mothers who are having to tell their teenage sons, hey, if you ever consume porn online, I just want to warn you, I'm one of the most watched videos on Pornhub and it was not consensual.
Right.
Those conversations are crazy.
Well, yeah, there's what's the actors don't Google mommy.
Right. That's right.
um it's I think what you're talking about to a certain extent and trying to dispel the myth is about how we want to have an answer and categorize something. Oh, this is something that men do, something that women suffer from. This is something that women do and men suffer from. And never the twain shall meet. We want these simple answers, and none of them are simple. They all exist on a spectrum. It's not men suffer from sexual violence. They absolutely do. And it, like for children, depending on the environment, it's what's available.
Right.
Boys in the Catholic Church, they're
Right.
more over than females, and so you can start picking apart the numbers and nuance it by category, nuance it by what is happening for a person in a school system or in a church system or something else, and you can find the numbers. And then you look at this kind of, this large scale and even transnational, if you will, and you start to get these kind of piece out. Do you think that the AI generated porn piece, being more male, being the co-founder of the Neurodiverse Collective, that by and large, from a brain scan standpoint, men have a tendency to be a little more visual and by nature. We suffer from tech addiction a little more than females, numbers wise. And so there's also the disconnect piece. I can sit here and perseverate on something that's in front of me. It's not a real human being, it's a screen. And do you think that there are linkages to this kind of being on a spectrum and having this stuff kind of show up and be OCD like? It's obsessive. It keeps showing up. The person keeps reposting it and creating more and everything else. Do you see linkages in one diagnosis to this trauma area?
I think that's a better question for someone who studies perpetration more than I do. But I can tell you that in the autism community, I'm dealing with way more victims than I am perpetrators.
Huh.
It's, we have found that sexual violence is much more common than we anticipated and seen more readily than, we treat trauma at the Mental Health Collective. We're known for that. So we have a lot of survivors at the Mental Health Collective, but the Neurodivergent Collective, just as much or more. I do understand where you're going, though. I think that, that could maybe be the case 15 years ago in terms of not neurodivergent folks, but just like tech, like smart tech folks use this as an opportunity. But now you can get a free app and
Yeah.
create this, right? So even the most, tech, uneducated tech person, if they know how to
You grab
operate
an
the app,
app
follow the directions, can
and
do it.
pick some pics and say, "Hey, create this," and
That's right.
they'll get a product.
They'll get a product. That's
Yeah.
right. So, and I think there's a responsibility on us as, or really on tech creators, on how they can monitor that. With my consulting with Meta, one of our first meetings, it was pre-pandemic, which feels like 100 years ago. I don't remember if it was 17 or 18 or 19, but they were asking, when these things get posted on their platforms, what are the advocates' ideas of taking them off? And because Meta has that face recognition software, right, where you can update, I don't know if you're on Facebook, but you can upload an image of yourself and it'll identify everybody in the picture,
Yeah.
right, based on who's
Yeah.
been tagged before. And so they can now use that technology when someone reports a sexual image, and try to find it and take it off their platform that way. But a lot of other platforms won't take responsibility for it. And so, that I think is something we need to have a bigger conversation about. It should not be this easy to create harmful pornographic material. And with AI, it can easily detect if it's porn, right? We can put
Right.
those filters on these platforms. So let's do that to create
Yeah.
a sense of,
This is not a porn platform. You can't
that's
post
right.
it here. And then probably on platforms that are porn platforms like Pornhub, some additional measure of validating source. You know, I really don't know anything about that end of the world, honestly. But, it's harmful and it gets out there. I mean, you've got major industries advertising on Pornhub now. You had some guy run for office and he put some of his advertisement on Pornhub. That's
Yeah,
how prominent it is.
it's prominent, and Pornhub has been in a lot of lawsuits because they have, in some, I don't want to entangle in these lawsuits, but, it is believed that Pornhub is aware that some of the videos that they put for free, to get people to pay for their platform, those videos have been reported as sexual assaults and
Right.
non-consensual. But Pornhub, with my understanding, has not been
Kind of
motivated to take it
their
down because it
hands off.
generates revenue, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is the problem is revenue generation. Problem's money.
Capitalism at the end of the
Capitalism at
day,
the end of the day,
right?
capitalism's the problem. I knew it.
Capitalism is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we were talking earlier about men and women, and how we sort of separate this in a sexual violence lens. And I think, there's a lot of tech companies are owned by men, right? A lot of people who code and create the algorithms are male. Tech is still very much a male dominated industry. And I'm not sure that the awareness and the empathy of the effects of this are there like a female dominated industry might be more
Yeah.
conducive to lean into,
Yeah. So how do we titrate that in? What's your thoughts about the solution for something like that?
Well, we haven't talked about senior citizens, and we don't have to, but I do think it's important to note older adults above the age of, I think it's 55, are the second most common victims of revenge porn. And
Really?
yes,
No kidding.
and so, I think we talk about it from a child perspective, and we should, because they're developing minds and their safety in the world really matters. But I think as a society, we need to be talking about this generally, in the same way that you hear about, STD epidemics in nursing homes, right? And us doing education about sort of how to have safer, intimacy I think we need to have that discussion too. I'm a big proponent of tech education at a school level, as part of sex ed, for
Right.
example. But I also, you're not required to take a class as a parent, but I do think we need to push more parent education, and vis-a-vis, hopefully, grandparent education and what this is and how to keep yourself safe.
Well, pushing sex ed is always it's this big topic. I mean, I know why it is. It seems silly that it gets restricted in the way that it does because it's really important that kids know. One of the things, and I think this is if we're talking about porn addiction and we're talking about these images, right? Something I told my kids, my two boys, is it said, look, you're going to run across it. It's going to happen. It's out there. It's all over the place. It's free. It's accessible. There's no stoppers. Not really. You press a button, says I'm 18, doesn't check. The thing that you need to realize is that the more you train your brain and your eye, if you will, quote unquote, to utilize those images for stimulation, for where you get your arousal, the more that image becomes the thing that arouses you, and the less the real thing one day doesn't stimulate you, and you can create a problem for
Yeah.
yourself. You can create a cognitive issue for yourself
Yeah.
if you spend too much time with this material. My advice to you is stay away from it. And, even if you do run into it, impose limits for yourself because one day you'll have a partner and that partner will look nothing like anything that's online
That's right. And won't want to have sex in those ways that you're
in
seeing
those ways
online.
either. You
Yeah,
know, all these are these positions are designed for camera
that's
view.
right.
Um, I, for the little amount of porn that I've seen in my life, I can promise you that's not what you're going to probably do in the bedroom.
That's right.
I'm just guessing. I don't want to know, but let's separate these two things.
Yeah.
And in order to have healthy intimacy and a healthy sex life, and intimacy is not just about sex; it's about touch and it's about togetherness and it's about all these other features, none of which exist in videos online.
Right.
Almost none. There's very little out there that shows things that include intimacy, include relationship, and all these other things. It's like, so please be careful and don't cause a problem for yourself that will cause you also, and has caused for many, performance issues in the bedroom.
I was going to say erectile dysfunction is causally linked
That
to the amount of pornography that you consume. That's right.
that's absolutely right. So when they heard that, they were like, "We're whoa, wait." And it like that's just that didn't take me a minute. Like that's just a dose of education, just
Well,
a
Todd, I want to
small little
compliment
dose.
you because I think having sons is such a responsibility. I mean, being a parent is a responsibility generally, but it reminds me of my good friend's interaction with her son, where he was a teenager and in his first relationship, and she checks his text messages from time to time, and she came across this um, conversation of, hey, I want to send you a sexy photo. And he was like, are you sure? I don't want to pressure you to do that. And she had, called me and was like, I'm so proud of my son because in all the ways that I've
Awesome.
been trying to tell him about this, it was like the girlfriend was pushing for, let me send this to you already, and him trying to talk her out of it. And, having those conversations with boys is so important, and we know from like a sexual violence standpoint that perpetrator intervention is so key, and especially college age sexual assault at bars and fraternity parties and things. But you need to know about it, right? You need to
Right.
have conversations about it.
Right.
And when it comes to your own personal sexual health, like how amazing, Todd, that you were able to have conversations with your sons about being intimate and sharing intimacy. I mean, God, how many parents actually sit down with their kids and separate what is sex and what is intimacy? Those are two important topics that I'm not sure get talked about the dinner table. And where do
Yeah.
they get talked about? At parties, with other people who are just learning too. And I bet intimacy and connection and love is not part of those younger person conversations. So anyway, compliments to you for doing that.
Well, I say this. It's like I appreciate being complimented. Everybody likes compliments, right? But to me, it's an awful low bar.
Yeah,
To me, like having good conversations so that your kids are educated about things and they're prepared to be in the world in a healthy and sustainable and, adaptive kind of way
right.
just makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Now, I'm trained. I've worked with adolescents. I've worked with large populations of people with various levels of mental health and lack of health conditions. And I'm well educated and I've got all the benefits that might entail. And but I also a lot of what I know is not what I got from school, not what I got from
that's right.
it's what I got from being drawn towards things that caused me to address issues of my own or feel healthy or have better relationships or do explore being a human being on this planet, being a responsible male, which is just, for all the males out there, is just as much about being vulnerable as it is about being tough. It's like this mythology that's out there for males. It I know why it's there. I wish I knew how to solve it for guys because I think what they're desperately afraid and they don't know how to behave and they've got this dichotomy of conflicting kind of roles they're supposed to embrace, tough and tough but not sensitive, and you can't cry and all, you've got all these messages and none of that's sustainable and none of it's real.
Right.
And vulnerability is just as important to a healthy human being as anything else. And so, where's the place where all that stuff that can live? I got a group of friends and we talk about how to help males, but there still seem to be a large crowd of guys out there that are just following this party line, the red pill societies and those, and even people who are educated are, I give Jordan Peterson a hard time because I'm like, not all his points are not necessarily bad. He makes some good points, but he's just a jerk about it and he's aggro about it and he's got this very male centric approach, and I think he just doesn't do people any services. He's not really making the world a better place. So
Having
I
those role models, I think, is so important. And I don't know that parents, I mean, I'm curious your thoughts here as a parent, coach, and educator, but I'm not sure parents recognize how much of a role model they are and how much, their own conversations with their kids about their marriage or their divorce or their dating life has an impact on how kids create their own internal world of intimacy and relationships.
yeah.
And it's yeah, it's hard to help parents recognize because I'm raising a teen now and I know she loves me, but man, she does her best to make me feel insignificant sometimes.
Right, right,
And only because I'm in the field that I'm in, it's like I know I'm not. I know all of these interactions matter. But if I didn't have the education, I would throw my hands up too. And
right.
so I'm curious, how do you work with parents in that way and tell them that? What are the obstacles of them recognizing their own
Mm,
influence in
a lot of
this?
times parents are of course dealing with crisis, as when they're working with us, but a lot of times it's all about the fear of making your child uncomfortable or engaging in conversations that are sticky or setting limits or any of these other things. And if you're afraid to set healthy limits and boundaries with your child, the chances are good you're also afraid to have those kind of close, touchy conversations with them. And one of the solutions I think is actually important to name, in my experience at least, is that there's always the big talk, right? You got to have the big sex talk. You've got to have the big, whatever talk it is that you have to have with your child. Responsibility talk. Don't drive your car too fast talk. Whatever it is. And I'm a big fan of information. Like, look, I'm you're going to be in plenty of places where you're going to decide what you do. I won't be there to tell you or to manage it or to control it.
Yeah.
Um, whether it's drugs or it's sex or it's how fast you drive your car and all these other things. Let me just give you some information.
Yeah.
If you do this, the more chance you do this, the higher risk you are of getting a car accident. Or how fast you drive and work, the when you hang out with friends, if somebody hands you drugs, you don't know what's in it. You don't know where it came from, and there are all kinds of substances out there. They can literally kill you. The buyer beware goes for everyone. If you're out there doing these things, if you're out there engaging in intimate relationship, it needs to be consensual. People don't think you need to tell your children that sex needs to be consensual. I'm like, but you do.
That's right.
But you do. Not
Yeah.
because it's a foreign concept, so they don't know anything. and giving them anything, they don't have to be big conversations. Like, let me give you a chunk. I want to
Yeah.
give you a chunk of information right now, and you
Yeah.
do with it what you will. But this is what you need to know about what's going to happen and what happens to people and what are the consequences of these behaviors. And it takes me 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Good luck,
And
son. Enjoy the prom. You know what I
that,
mean? Like,
yeah, that's politically relevant right now too. There's conversations in school boards and school districts generally around taking consent out of sex education, and that is a scary
terrible, terrible
proposition.
idea.
Yeah, it's working with sexual assault victims as long as I have, I can tell you that there have been many instances when I hear the experience from the victim where I'm not questioning her experience that it was a non-consensual act. But when I hear sort of the events on the other side of the man's side, I'm not sure he even knew to ask for consent, look for consent, recognize that, when you're this intoxicated, when someone freezes, they need to be responsive to you, things
Right.
like that,
Just
that
was clueless to any of that.
just overwhelmed by their own sense of sensory experience and maybe what they've seen on Pornhub and not paying at all attention to the person that they're with.
Which
Um,
baffles me, but
Right. Right. But it's like that consent conversation of like, are you okay with this? It's a simple question,
yeah.
and the fact that we would remove that from education in schools is beyond me.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that are beyond me these days, but yeah, favorite video about consent is the British one about tea.
Yes,
It's like, if you asked a person if they wanted tea and they said no, you can still give them tea. If they were asleep, you wouldn't even ask them if they wanted tea. It's like it's perfect.
it
It's
is perfect.
absolutely perfect.
It is.
Oh,
Larry
well,
David does a great on Curb Your Enthusiasm
okay.
and his character. Did you see that where,
I mean, it's
like, is it
hilarious.
okay if I unbutton your blouse? Is it okay if I put my right hand on your left breast? Is it, it's very exaggerated consent conversation, but a great parody on, you
It's
know,
fantastic.
this conversation generally.
Well, I think that we opened up a series of remaining rabbit holes that you and I could go start rubbing down for a
Definitely.
little while, but I have like you opened a world up to me that I think I need to be more aware of just so I can educate people that are dealing with it and everything else. But I certainly look for solutions that sound like, I'm grateful to be with you as one of those people that's out to make a world a better co-conspirator making the world a better place. Um,
Good to be your co-conspirator. Thank you for nerding out with me on this very important conversation in my mind, and we're not having it
Absolutely.
enough. So thank you for bringing it to this platform and talking about it.
Well, Dr. K, we call you Dr. K because you're Dr. Kristen to us.
Master Weatherly.
That's right. That's right. It's been great to have you on the show. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm sure we're going to do it again.
Thanks again. It's been fun.
It's been Head Inside Mental Health with Todd Weatherly. We'll see you next time.
I feel so lonely and lost in here. I need to find my way home. I feel so lonely and lost in here. I need to find my way home. I feel so lonely and lost in here. I need to find my way